1. Introduction. RAWSEP View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable. Wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove, and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP View purple air PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, or RAWSEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this RAWSEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025 and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning wood. The adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Webisode 57DHXYA October 3, 2025 Ukraine Prime Minister may be Trump whisperer and Czech Trump. In episode 57DHXYA, one newly appointed woman, Ukraine Prime Minister, may be a Trump whisperer. 2 Czech Trump poised to return as Prime Minister in elections. 3 Trump shutdown U.S. Senate Trump and government shutdown live update Senate to return for votes as deadlock reaches third day. 4 Illinois Chicago transport funding cut. RAWSEP View mass transport is cleaner than driving individual automobiles. White House halts $2.1 billion of Chicago transport funding. Senate to hold vote as shutdown enters third day. 5 Air pollution caused by indoor residential wood burning should be mitigated and stopped if other forms of pollution, such as fossil fuel burning, are mitigated and stopped in order to mitigate climate change. From the article headline, Make Green Great Again. Can appeals to the wallet make climate policy an election winner? 6 RAWSEP View air pollution caused by indoor residential wood burning cannot be compared by irritation caused by the noise of a leaf blower. From the article headline, Everything that is wrong with the human race inside the bizarre Hollywood war on the leaf blower movie's main content. 0 RAWSEP View Republican politicians performing for an audience of 1, such as performing for Trump alone, does not result in much good for the rest of us in America. 1 A new prime minister in Ukraine speaks the language of money to Trump, and so may have some sway with Trump. If Trump aids Ukraine, it may have the economic benefit of ending the Russian war of aggression on terms favorable to Ukraine, and so in terms favorable to the European Union, and so in terms favorable to the free world, which includes America. Even at this time, 2 A supposed economic populist may win an election for prime minister in the Czech Republic this weekend, but are his promises of lowering costs may be a mirage and a smokescreen for primarily enacting policies damaging to the national security of Europe, such as lowering aid to Ukraine. Is he a Bernie Sanders populist, that is to say a real populist, not spreading misinformation and disinformation, but speaking the truth to the Czech population? Not likely, and less likely if the so-called populist will have to build a coalition government with the right in the Czech Republic. 3 Trump and congressional Republicans continue to perpetuate the false claim that Democrats shut down the government. Trump also seemed to further inflame the conflict late Thursday night by mocking and demeaning Democrats and their leaders in a series of social media posts. 4 Funding for Chicago transport was cut by Trump directly after cutting funding for New York transport. 5 The talk at Climate Week in New York City was about affordability of green energy, but that Democratic talking point was countered by Trump the same week, who called the Green New Deal a green scam in the Trump speech at the United Nations. During Climate Week, this unfair characterization by Trump himself flies in the face of scientific evidence that countering climate change is good for the economy and for lowering costs, since wind and solar power are now cheaper than fossil fuel power generation. 6 Perhaps irritation with the noise of leaf blowers is not overstated, but keep your eyes on the prize of stopping indoor residential wood burning first in order to prevent air pollution. 1 Ukraine RAWSEP View. It may be fortunate that the newly appointed woman Ukraine Prime Minister may be a Trump whisperer. From the article headline, She speaks the Trump language. Meet the Ukraine new Prime Minister. The New York Times excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship of residents against wood smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times October 3, 2025 The appointment of Yulia Sviridenko. Business-oriented official shows how Kyiv is trying to persuade the Trump administration that working with the country can be lucrative even in wartime. The Yulia Sviridenko debut trip to the United States as the Prime Minister of Ukraine began at a showcase of American capitalism on a late August morning. She joined a crowd of investors in the NASDAQ building in Times Square to celebrate the first ever American listing of a Ukrainian company. The telecom firm Kyivstar, suspenseful music throbbed as a countdown clock ticked to 0, and Ms. Sviridenko rang the opening bell of the market. It is rare for a prime minister to appear at the exchange, and even rarer for a company from a war-torn country to be listed on it. Ms. Sviridenko, in a recent interview in Kyiv with the New York Times, said it showed Ukraine is not only about donations, but it is about business. Her words appeared calculated to resonate with President Trump. He has long grumbled that the United States has not received anything in return for the tens of billions of dollars it has poured into the Ukraine war effort, mostly under his predecessor President Biden. With direct U.S. financial assistance now off the table, Kyiv is working to convince Trump that it is no charity case, but a place where lucrative business can be done even in wartime. Appointed by President Volodymyr Zelensky in the middle of July, Ms. Sviridenko, at age 39, seems tailor-made for that task. She has spent her career working in private businesses or on economic matters for regional and national governments. As economy minister, she negotiated a high-stakes minerals deal with the Trump administration that has become the foundation for the new business-oriented relationship between Kyiv and Washington. Her appointment was a message from Ukraine to the United States to Trump, said Mykola Davidyak, a Kyiv-based political analyst. The Ms. Sviridenko elevation also reflects a growing concentration of power under Zelensky, according to Kyiv-based Western diplomats and Ukrainian lawmakers. Perhaps her biggest test came this year when Ukraine negotiated a deal to open its mineral riches to the United States, hoping to win the Trump favor by appealing to his mercantile instincts. Ms. Sviridenko led the talks for Ukraine as they quickly grew tense. Washington made demands that felt to Ukrainian officials like outright extortion, such as granting the United States half of the Ukraine mineral rights. Ms. Sviridenko eventually secured better terms and signed the deal, forging what she called a trust-based working relation with Secretary Bessent. One of the first acts of Ms. Sviridenko as Prime Minister was implementing the Zelensky push to expand government aid for Ukrainians. One of her current priorities is securing Western funding to enhance Ukrainian air defenses, which have been stretched thin by relentless Russian attacks. The government building where she works is a reminder of the stakes. Last month, a Russian ballistic missile struck the upper floors just above her office. The missile did not explode for reasons that remain unclear, leaving a gaping hole and a lingering acrid smell of smoke. To Czech Republic, a man known as the Czech Trump Andrej Babiš is poised to return as prime minister in elections. The New York Times, the Czech Trump, a populist tycoon, is poised to return as prime minister. The party of Andrej Babiš, former leader of the Czech government, is expected to prevail in parliamentary elections that begin Friday. RAWSEP View, a supposed economic populist, may win an election for prime minister in the Czech Republic this weekend, but are his promises of lowering costs maybe a mirage and a smokescreen for primarily enacting policies damaging to the national security of Europe, such as lowering aid to Ukraine? Stopping or lowering aid levels to Ukraine would be a false economy for the Czech people, as the costs of defense against Russia will surely increase if Ukraine is weakened. Hopefully before the Czech people vote, they will have had access to news about the United States that shows that Trump himself did not lower costs for ordinary people as he promised during the Trump 2024 campaign. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship of residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, the New York Times, October 3, 2025. 4 years ago, the Czech Republic voted out its populist wealthy scandal singed prime minister known as the Czech Trump. Now echoing President the Trump-owned comeback, Andrej Babiš, prime minister from 2017 to 2021, is poised to return to that office, potentially reviving a Eurosceptic government that experts say could trim military aid to Ukraine. His party ANO is expected to prevail in 2 days of parliamentary elections that begin Friday. Like Trump, the 71-year-old Babiš is more interested in taking a transactional approach with the European Union than in forging sweeping foreign policies, and like Trump, he is expected to try to foist support for Ukraine onto European partners rather than share the load. Babiš also is capitalizing on a wobbly economy to appeal to voters, much as Trump did. No major Czech party is expected to win outright majorities in the 200-seat lower house of parliament. The Babiš ability to form a government may hinge on his willingness to bring political extremes into his coalition. At least two of the parties to which Babiš would turn hold Euro and NATO skeptic or in favor of Russian views, said Daniel Hegedus, director for Central Europe at the German Marshall Fund in Berlin. He said it would be a nightmare scenario for international European partners should Babiš invite those parties to join the government. Their influence could turn the Czech Republic into a sort of naysayer on support for Ukraine. ANO, which means yes, has pledged to cut taxes, increase pensions, cap energy prices, and freeze salaries of politicians. It has also said it would eliminate fees that finance public television and radio, which is likened to a tax cut, but one that opponents have criticized as giving the government more control over broadcast media. Hegedus described the party as focused on economic and social issues without a strong ideology. Although the government that Babiš led when first elected prime minister was considered politically center-left last year, Babiš founded with others the Patriots for Europe, a right-wing main opposition party in the European Union, with Prime Minister Viktor Orbán of Hungary. Experts predict that if elected, Babiš would align the Czech Republic with the nationalist policies of Hungary and Slovakia, both of which maintain ties with Russia. In a debate this week, ANO joined mainstream parties in calling Russia the greatest threat to the Czech Republic, but Babiš and other ANO leaders have been more circumspect about continuing military aid to help Ukraine defend against Russia, and have played on weariness of voters with the 3-year-long war to insist that support be diverted back into the Czech economy. Babiš has also said he would scrap a multi-billion-dollar program to supply Ukraine with desperately needed ammunition procured by Czech companies. Other ANO officials have since softened that stance, suggesting NATO manage it instead. The right-wing Freedom and Direct Democracy Party, or SPD, and the left-wing Stasilo Party have vowed to end Czech assistance to Ukraine and favor diplomacy with all key global players, including Russia. Babiš may look to at least one of those, if not both, to create a coalition government. Vit Dostal, the executive director of the Prague-based research group Association for International Affairs, predicted that other European leaders would work to persuade Babiš to continue the ammunition program under Czech auspices and keep Russia at bay. I do not think Merz wants another irritant in Europe, Dostal said, referring to Chancellor Friedrich Merz of Germany, one of the biggest backers of Ukraine politics at play. Babiš has said he would prefer to govern alone in a minority government instead of creating a coalition like the center-right alliance led by the current Prime Minister Petr Fiala. In that scenario, ANO would run government ministries, but partner with other parties on a case-by-case basis to push issues through parliament. It is also possible that ANO will coalesce with more mainstream political parties, including from the Fiala government. Although he and Babiš have dismissed that idea, such a step would be difficult for these parties to justify to their electorates, yet it could be presented as a means to prevent extremists from gaining a foothold in the government. An analysis by the Dostal organization concluded the Czech President Petr Pavel is expected to keep a steady hand on foreign policy. The presidency is a largely ceremonial role, but Pavel, a former NATO general, has had considerable influence on security issues. It is unclear, however, how much sway he might maintain in a government led by Babiš. The two men faced off in a 2023 presidential election, which Pavel won. Initial election results could be announced as soon as Saturday evening, although it could take weeks to form a government. 3. Trump shutdown. U.S. Senate. Trump and government shutdown. Live update. Senate to return for votes as deadlock reaches third day. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship of residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, the Senate was set to reconvene Friday as a federal shutdown entered a third day and seemed likely to extend into next week, with neither side showing signs of backing down from a partisan impasse over federal spending. The Senate was planning to vote on procedural motions to advance the spending bills that need to pass for the government to reopen. The Republican plan is to send senators home for the weekend if Democrats again move to block the GOP stopgap spending bill. President Trump and congressional Republicans continue to perpetuate the false claim that Democrats shut down the government, and Trump also seemed to further inflame the conflict late Thursday night, mocking and Demeaning Democrats and their leaders in a series of social media posts maximizing pain. The Trump plan meeting on agency cuts was part of a strategy to maximize the pain of the shutdown and target political foes. The White House was also readying a plan to potentially lay off droves of civil servants. The administration also paused or moved to cancel billions of dollars in approved funds, including more than $7.5 billion in awards terminated by the Energy Department, mostly for projects in states with Democratic governors and senators. Dueling plans. Democrats are demanding that Republicans who controlled both chambers of Congress and the presidency negotiate on Democratic terms before Democrats agree to lend their votes to a bill needed to reopen the government. For Illinois, Chicago transport funding cut. RAWSEP View mass transport is cleaner than driving individual automobiles. White House halts $2.1 billion of Chicago transport funding. Senate to hold vote as shutdown enters third day. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship of residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. White House halts $2.1 billion of Chicago infrastructure funding. U.S. Capitol during government shutdown. The federal government put $2.1 billion marked for Chicago infrastructure projects on hold. Office and Management and Budget Director Russ Vought said on Friday in another jab at a Democrat-led city during the U.S. government shutdown. Vought wrote on X that projects affected included the Red Line extension, which was set to break ground next year in New York. Vought said $18 million for infrastructure would be paused, including funding for a new rail tunnel under the Hudson River. Meanwhile, the White House has continued to use its official taxpayer-funded social media accounts to insult and mock Democrats, treating the standoff like a political campaign. The political messaging by the agencies may be a violation of the Hatch Act, which prohibits federal employees from engaging in partisan political activity. Furloughed federal employees at some agencies have been instructed to set out-of-office messages explaining that they are not working because Democrats caused to shut down. Government agency websites also have displayed messages informing site visitors the websites are temporarily on hold due to the Democrat-led shutdown. Other agency websites have used more combative language. The radical left has chosen to shut down the United States government in the name of reckless spending and obstructionism. The website of the Treasury Department reads, even warnings over economic damage do not appear to be encouraging conciliatory moves. 5. Air pollution caused by indoor residential wood burning should be mitigated and stopped if other forms of pollution, such as fossil fuel burning, are mitigated and stopped in order to mitigate climate change. Make green great again. Can appeals to the wallet make climate policy an election winner? Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship of residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. One word stood out at the 2025 Climate Week. NYC affordability. The former Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm said Democrats must focus on the ability of renewable power to shrink power bills to win elections. Now as utility bills soar around the country, Americans on every part of the political spectrum are framing their energy and climate proposals as ways to protect the pocketbooks of ordinary people. Every year, Climate Week in New York City brings together government officials, corporate actors, scholars, and activists for climate-focused events timed to coincide with the United Nations General Assembly this year. The Trump Against Environment Blitz cast a massive shadow over the event in appearances through the week. White House officials aim to peg the Trump deregulatory agenda as a win to lower bills up Americans, with Trump calling green energy a scam. Climate advocates attempted to expose that statement as false while getting Americans on board with green policies on the grounds that they can cut costs. For instance, 2 Democratic representatives from Illinois and California unveiled a proposal to speed new power line construction and restore green energy incentives, which Trump repealed earlier this year. It's named the Cheap Energy Act. It is a framework that Jennifer Granholm, who served as U.S. Energy Secretary under Biden, said she expected as climate slips down the list of political concerns for Americans, while economic worries rise. My guess is you are not going to see a lot of politicians using the word climate, because people see that as a nice-to-have concern, not a must-have, and right now they are in the must-have mode. She said affordability is key. Those well to the left of Jennifer Granholm also called for a focus on affordability in the climate fight. Politicians should prioritize green economic populist campaigns such as fair free transit and the build-out of decarbonized public housing. On Wednesday of Climate Week, progressives gathered. It has long been understood that if we are going to build a mass movement, people need to see the connection between the transition to renewable energy and spending less money. Merely talking about affordability is not enough. Trump, for instance, has failed to deliver on his promise of lowering bills. While handing massive benefits to oil giants and other corporations, we need to focus on actually bringing relief to people, and we see that when we really center people over profit, people respond to that. People can tell who is for real. 6. RAWSEP View until indoor residential wood burning is eliminated. It is a distraction of focus, with Trump like irritation on leaf blowers rather than focus on the real and present danger and real harm to human health from indoor residential wood burning. The editor of RAWSEP would like people to get their priorities straight. Noise pollution from leaf blowers is much less consequential than air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Sure, the editor of RAWSEP can feel empathy and imagine the ear pain. First things first, and way down on the irritation meter, or even taken on the irritation meter, should be the ignorant irritation Trump feels when viewing wind turbines in the distance from his golf courses. Air pollution caused by indoor residential wood burning is not comparable to mere irritation caused by the noise pollution of leaf blower, but on second thought, it is not bizarre to want to protect your hearing and want to not go deaf from a neighborhood appliance that serves no useful purpose. The leaf blower user rake. Folks, all signs point to the leaf blower used primarily to bully neighbors. Kate Blanchett is onto something, and maybe we need a movie star with star power to lead the way back to the simple rake or broom. From the article headline, everything that is wrong with the human race inside the bizarre war of Hollywood on the leaf blower movies. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship of residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. Kate Blanchett and her animus toward towards every single leaf blower way back in 2007, when she characterized leaf blowers as everything that is wrong with the human race. In the 18 years since the two-time Oscar winner has ranted about leaf blowers, headlines the New York Times October 3, 2025. Artificial intelligence Sora of OpenAI makes disinformation extremely easy and extremely real. The New York Times. California large fire burns at Chevron refinery in El Segundo. The New York Times comedian's late night sums up day 2 of the shutdown. The New York Times mails RAWSEP View adequate education and real knowledge of science should replace conspiracy theories masked as science presented by influencers to males online. From the article headline, opinion, how the manosphere hijacks the interest of young men in science. The New York Times mails video. Games have become the main way boys socialize. Is that bad? The New York Times movies is one battle after another the best movie of the year. The New York Times. New York City housing 140,000 NYC students are homeless. Can the next mayor change that? The New York Times. New York City mayoral race Mamdani says he would phase out NYC gifted program for early grades. The New York Times. Trump corrupt use of taxpayer money. Opinion, the East Wing ballroom is the Trump raw display of power. The New York Times. Trump corruption. Opinion, when Trump rages, Silicon Valley stays silent. The New York Times. Trump economy lack of data. Government shutdown leaves Wall Street without jobs. Data. The New York Times. Trump economy lack of data. It is a bad time to cut the information coming from corporate America. The New York Times. Trump economy lack of data. Jobs report withheld by shutdown leaves economists guessing. The New York Times. Trump versus the Fed. Trump economy. Supreme Court allows Lisa Cook to remain at Fed for now. The New York Times. Trump lawsuits. Judge rejects the Trump argument and throws out suit against UN agency. The New York Times. Trump military Pete Hegseth. Trump and an era of military impunity. The New York Times. Trump shutdown U.S. Senate. Trump and government shutdown live update. Senate to return for votes as deadlock reaches third day. The New York Times. Trump shutdown RAWSEP View government agencies violating the Hatch Act. From the article headline, partisan language inserted into the automated emails of Education Department workers. The New York Times. Trump shutdown Democrats. Trump escalates attacks on Democrats in a government shutdown like no other. The New York Times. Trump Supreme Court justice as political violence rises. The would-be assassin of Justice Kavanaugh to be sentenced. The New York Times. Trump tariffs. Housing. New tariffs could worsen the housing crisis of America. The New York Times. Trump versus universities and colleges. Opinion, community colleges need community. The New York Times. Trump versus universities. Republicans demand information from the College Board and firms that help set college prices. The New York Times. Women inequality basketball. Opinion, the WNBA is making more money than ever. Why are not the players? The New York Times. United Kingdom. Isle of Wight. Can this isolated British island keep its economy afloat? The New York Times. The New York Times. October 3, 2025. The Isle of Wight, known for its beaches and a rock festival that featured Jimi Hendrix and Bob Dylan, has had setbacks in manufacturing, but there have also been bright spots. United Kingdom women equality. Sarah Mullally is named as first female Archbishop of Canterbury. The New York Times. Czech Republic. Czech Trump. Andrej Babiš is poised to return as prime minister in elections. The New York Times. Ukraine. She speaks the Trump language. Meet the Ukraine new prime minister. The New York Times. China. Artificial intelligence AI is driving a stock market rally in China too. The New York Times. Headlines. The Guardian. October 3, 2025. Air pollution caused by indoor residential wood burning cannot be compared by irritation caused by the noise of a leaf blower. Everything that is wrong with the human race inside the bizarre war of Hollywood on the leaf blower movies. The Guardian. Air pollution caused by indoor residential wood burning should be mitigated and stopped if other forms of pollution such as fossil fuel burning is mitigated and stopped when climate change is mitigated. Make green great again. Can appeals to the wallet make climate policy an election winner? Environment. The Guardian. Air pollution caused by indoor residential wood burning can be compared by irritation caused by the short-term refinery fire. A fire is still burning at California Chevron refinery following explosion. California. The Guardian. Disillusion omics. The U.S. economy is not serving Gen Z. Alice Lastman. The Guardian. Illinois. Chicago transport funding cut. Mass transport is cleaner than individual automobile drives. White House halts $2.1 billion of Chicago transport funding. Senate to hold vote as shutdown enters third day. Must problems. Tesla sued by family of California teenager killed in fiery Cybertruck crash. U.S. News. The Guardian. Trump shutdown. Republican actions. Federal agencies blaming Democrats for shutdown in potentially illegal move. U.S. federal government shutdown 2025. The Guardian. Trump shutdown. Trump economy. Trump looks to the playbook of Nixon. Good for him, bad for the economy. U.S. economy. The Guardian. Indonesia. RAWSEP View unfair crime and punishment of an American citizen in a foreign land country. From the article headline, I use cannabis as medicine. The U.S. basketball player facing execution in Indonesia over $400 of gummies. Basketball. The Guardian. Germany. RAWSEP View drones probably from Russia. From the article headline, calls for police to shoot down drones after Munich airport disruption. Egypt. History which may resemble the present day in some ways. Cats, coffins, and sick notes discovering the forgotten workers of Egypt in broken pottery museums. The Guardian. Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies which we will post for her here.
Hi, I am Leone. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your local epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times.
1. Introduction. RAWSEP View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove. An international convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP View. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.